I'm delighted to hand over in setting the scene to two people from the University of Dundee who were commissioned by Scottish Government to do the research in advance of the action plan for young people and educators 14 plus. So I'm going to hand over Kumara Ward and Tanya MacDonald to the two of you. Next slide, Kirsten.
Thanks, Betsy, very much. I'll just let you know briefly, Tanya was unable to join us today, but I'm actually presenting for the whole team. So there were Doctors Martin Purcell, Liz Lakin, Marie Beresford-Day and Beverly Searle, as well as our two wonderful research assistants and research colleagues, Tanya MacDonald and Ros Birch, who are both PhDs here at Dundee. Next slide, please. And we can jump to the next one. As Betsy said, that we were engaged by the Scottish Government to conduct research with young people and practitioners, meaning teachers and CLD professionals, to investigate their perspectives of learning for sustainability as it stands through CLD programs and the curriculum for excellence. So we started with a survey, and the only part of that I'm going to share with you is the sections that pertain specifically to the teachers' perspectives about young people and their learning. Then we go directly to the young people and what they said, the themes and findings related to that, and then look at the conclusions that were in the report, which went to the government to support the refresh of the Learning for Sustainability Action Plan. Next slide, please. So it was mixed methods research, starting with a scoping survey. We had, that was the quantitative element. The qualitative elements were World Cafe events and 3 Horizons focus groups. And I'll get a little bit more into that as we go through. For our sampling, we worked through 6 regional improvement collaboratives and identified 8 local authorities with a geographical representation across the SMID index. We also included a Gaelic medium service, or setting rather. The analysis was using Braun and Clark's reflexive thematic analysis, and for the mixed methods, for the scoping survey, it was SPSS. Next slide, please. This is the survey section. So the practitioners said the learners that I work with were encouraged by them to learn and engage in sustainable practices. So you can see there that was agreed or strongly agreed at nearly 85%. They were encouraged within their educational settings to learn and engage in sustainable practices. They talked about sustainable actions and were encouraged to have opportunities to encounter LFS. I won't read out the numbers, you can see them there. They're aware of sustainable practices across the educational community. So we're dropping lower in terms of proportion of young people who said or did those things. Said they were empowered and involved in the development of the education setting approach to learning for sustainability. And in the section 3 about involvement while developing the whole setting approach, more than 50% said that they disagreed that they'd been involved while developing a whole school or setting approach. And of course, that comes out later in the qualitative findings. Next slide, please. So this is an overview of the numbers involved in the research. For the survey, we had a total of, I think, 47 practitioners, which was a very low response rate, partly due to the time of year, I think, coming up towards Christmas. When it came to young people and practitioners for the field work, we worked with 87 young people and 55 practitioners across those 8 local authorities. That resulted in excess of 80 recordings, which were transcribed and analysed. Next slide, please. So now we talk about the young people and specifically on what they said. Next slide, please. The questions that we asked were the following. How have you understood learning for sustainability? Where have you experienced or learned about it? and which experiences had been most effective in helping their understandings, and the ways in which they had been involved in school or community projects related to learning for sustainability. We also asked them about practical examples that they could see in their school or community related to learning for sustainability, and what they would like to see promoted and done in their community settings and in their schools. Next slide, please. So the first thing we identified was that, the first thing we looked at was the understanding and learning about sustainability. And one of the highlights, or one of the key messages, you might say, is that the term learning for sustainability was not well known and completely unknown for some young people. So terms like climate change, environmental science, they were terms that resonated more with them. Climate change was familiar, but didn't really feel related much to their home context. Although having now been through another couple of seasons, that perspective may have changed when you think about all of the climate emergencies that have been in various places in Europe and other parts of the planet. Curriculum engagement was a common place for them to have learned about climate change and related issues, and in the obvious areas such as biology, geography, and modern studies, particularly related to Nat 4 and Nat 5 studies. Reusing, reducing, and recycling, we know that's been around for many years. That was a common understanding. But what it did was highlight the school initiatives, both positive and those that were absent. So the big blue bags for paper recycling was mentioned, paper making, buying secondhand clothing, reducing fast fashion, reusable water bottles, and removing plastic wrappings in canteens. So they were things that they had learned from. Linking additional learning to learning for sustainability included things like human rights, as well as other environmental aspects. So what we did in the World Cafes is we had a series of prompts on the tables where the young people could see word clouds, for example, and diagrams that connected learning for sustainability to all these other areas in life, you know, whether it be social justice, politics, community engagement, etc. So they started out, or many of them started out by saying, well, we don't know what it is. It's, you know, learning for sustainability doesn't mean much. Yes, we know about climate change. But then when they looked at all of these prompts, and they said, well, it actually means everything, and therefore it's nothing. So there was a little bit of recalibrating that was required. If learning for sustainability is related to everything, well, then we need to make it more explicit and make it clear what these links are. Obviously, things such as specialist groups, you know, self-learning to special interest groups, and following prominent people such as Greta Thunberg was familiar to them, although the opportunities to do that were quite limited. Next slide, please. The successes and best practice of learning for sustainability included outdoor learning field trips, and that might have been trips to farms, community gardens, beach litter cleanups, etc. Sustainability or eco clubs and projects, school classes, as I mentioned before, biology, geography, Nat 4 and 5, but also things like modern studies, home ec, and personal and social education. Partnerships and community engagement through schools and CLDs were highly regarded. Examples of making films, engaging in fast fashion, awareness campaigns. There were a variety of community activities that the young people mentioned. Attending COP26 online and schools engaging through resources, that was very limited but highly regarded also. A Duke of Edinburgh and John Muir Awards. And one of the things that they did highlight was memories of learning for sustainability activities in primary school. So litter picks, recycling, working towards Eco Green Flag Awards. And many of them said that there were, they remembered those activities fondly and lamented the fact that they weren't happening in their secondary school settings or in their CLD settings. Next slide, please. Their successes and best practice in learning for sustainability in the community. Obviously, there's some overlap with what I just said. So community projects, upcycling, reuse collections, community gardens, forest school activities also. So we came back to outdoor engagement again and again, and you'll find that that comes through the findings. Litter picking in local areas, beach cleanups, etc. Online conferences provided through the local authority or national organisation. Personal and lived experiences, so community renewables, growing hubs, even engagement in food banks. Beat the street activities across local community areas, climate ambassadors, so youth groups, forums and clubs, again, Duke of Edinburgh John Muir Award, fire skills, and that was related to Girl Guides and Scouts. So the community engagement seemed to be a really important element, not just for those in CLD settings, which is a little more relatable, I suppose, but for those in schools. They wanted to go beyond the school gates and be involved in what was happening in the community. Next slide, please. There were substantial barriers to effective learning for sustainability, and the first, of course, was terminology, which I've already mentioned. There were limited opportunities for field trips. So the young people correlated the academic elements of learning about sustainability with the embodied experience of being outdoors. You know, one of them said, what's the point of us learning about sustainability while looking at PowerPoint slides and sitting on plastic chairs? It doesn't quite gel. And that kind of led into the lack of creativity. You know, they talked about how learning for sustainability could be taught through drama, fashion drives, arts, outdoor experiences, experiences, engagement and partnerships in the community. They talked about limited examples of sustainability practice in the school or community grounds, and particularly with school grounds, with even things like waste collection for compost. You know, food was not separated out as a waste product. It was put into the regular rubbish bin. So there was no recycling in the schools that we went to. And this was for OH&S reasons, which we found quite surprising. Funding for projects and partnership projects and conference learning was extremely limited. So there's some of the main barriers. Please, next slide. There's suggestions for promoting learning for sustainability, included more direct teaching and learning about learning for sustainability. So they, having really embraced the idea that learning for sustainability is related to all aspects of life, they wanted to see learning for sustainability imbued throughout the curriculum in schools and throughout the CLD learning program. Everything that they did in the community would be related to learning for sustainability in some way. And they also linked it to information dissemination on social issues. And so social and sustainability issues, just transitions became a key focus. Outdoor learning and creative learning was considered to be absolutely essential by the young people. They really wanted to spend more time outdoor in a range of settings. Raising the profile of targeted learning for sustainability clubs. So whilst many schools had small eco clubs or climate justice or whatever you know, they have various names. The awareness of them was very limited, and the opportunity to be involved was also very limited due to timetabling, due to constraints of space, due to resources that the clubs had to actually disseminate their information. And of course, environment, buildings and social justice, they were also issues that the young people really wanted to be in focus. They wanted the school buildings to change. They wanted the CLD settings to change. They wanted to reflect commitment to regenerative and sustainable living. Next slide, please. So in short, they wanted us to integrate LFS as a key priority for schools and communities and in local authorities, and to act through initiatives that connected those schools and communities. They felt like there were community silos. They should be more connected with what was happening in the community, and those in the community should be able to get recognition for the learning that they engaged in the community and make that relevant to the school assessment process. They wanted to make LFS available to all young people and age groups. So they felt that it was very limited in secondary school, usually in the upper levels of secondary school. They wanted to join up learning and action, so schools and communities are examples of sustainable practice. They wanted people to be able to look at their communities and schools and say they're really doing something. They wanted to link sustainability with understanding diversity and combating discrimination, and for it to address social justice issues. So really what they were talking about is the beginning concepts of just transitions. Support independence to allow Scotland to manage its own sustainability. This is before Nicola resigned. I'm not sure if they would say the same thing now. That would be interesting to see, but there were quite a few young people who mentioned that, which is why it's included in the findings. And also to take LFS outdoors, to be creative, use the arts, focus on health and wellbeing. Next slide, please. And I think, apart from just quickly reading this quote, we're in a transition time where we really need to be sort of upping our game. I think that's an understatement. That's from Site 6, a practitioner. Next slide. Betsy, I'm aware I've gone over just a little bit. I've got conclusions and recommendations. Are you happy for me to continue?
Just quickly go through those. That would be grand.
Okay, all right. So the recommendations were based on the previous Learning for Sustainability Action Plan. So they appear under the same, well, not based on, they appear under the same headings. So we asked, the young people wanted the government to standardise terminology and ensure its use throughout the curriculum, ameliorating confusion and content, and make sustainability more explicitly recognisable and accessible, and to integrate it throughout the school curriculum and CLD programs, so that there was a living awareness across all contexts, and it made it more of a meaningful aspect of young people's lives. Enhancing opportunities for outdoor learning, so they were broader in scope and more frequent, and also provide meaningful and genuine opportunities for young people to exercise agency. So they wanted to be active in their communities and taking action, making decisions. Next slide, please. With regard to the GTCS professional standards, every practitioner, school and education leader needed to demonstrate learning for sustainability in practice. With regard to that, we said integrate LFS policy at school, CLD and learning at local authority level to guide practice and support stakeholders to identify the potential practice in their areas and identify the related outcomes. To provide time and training for practitioners to integrate LFS, because one of the big things for the practitioners was lack of time, lack of funding, lack of resources. 7 was to appoint LFS leads in every school to ensure policy was disseminated, practitioners were aware of and enacted good practice locally and regionally, and that LFS activities were mapped across school and CLD settings. Next slide, please.
Mara, perhaps just go through the top line conclusions.
Okay. 8 and 9 involved appointing LFS leads and creating steering groups that involved a range of community members. Next slides. And developing policy to support LFS at all levels, and to also upgrade school grounds and CLD grounds to reflect a commitment to sustainability. Next slide. With regard to the strategic national plan, to redevelop it, to incorporate the requirements of all of these organisations mentioned here, and principles for living a sustainable life as identified by the UN. Next slide, and final slide. Provide additional opportunities for stakeholder groups, for stakeholder groups, and particularly for young people to participate in their respective communities, engage or task local authorities with the role of coordinating the national plan, involving all stakeholders, and of course identifying LFS as a core principle in education for young people and communities. I think I will leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Kamara, and I think hearing all of that from young people and practitioners, and the fact that it then has fed into the refreshed action plan is really something that we all need to take on board, that these are the views of young people, and particularly the need for community engagement with partners, the interest in outdoor experiences, and just hearing that young people really want more of this, I think,
That's right.
is quite powerful.
And they want agency. You know, they want to be at the table where the decisions are made.